Welcome back to the Unarmored Project. If this is your first time, my name is Abe, and today I want to talk about something that's been hitting me a little bit harder than I expected. When I originally was starting to put together this episode, I really thought that I was going to lean into like pivot points and what those are. You know, the moments that change our lives, that send us in different directions. But I kind of had to sit with it because these last couple weeks have been more opening and revealing than I expected. And I really realized that this episode is about something else. And that's the conversations that I wasn't having. Because when I look back at some of the hardest parts of my life, I don't look back at them and see, these magic pivot points or um, knowing or not knowing that something was wrong and then just suddenly coming to these revelations. Instead, the realization I'm coming to is I think I knew it, I just wasn't talking about it. So, again, this is episode 2 of the Unarmored Project podcast, Conversations That We're Not Having. So, this last couple weeks, like I said, it's been a roller coaster for me. And it hit in a time and ways that I was expecting more highlights than lows. And it hit really hard. It just kind of floored me. Recently, my fire department went through a loss. One of our members passed away. And it's been something that I've acknowledged, I've shared, and have gone through motions with, but I was still bottling up. And to make that even better, I was stacking that on top of other losses that I've experienced over the last 2 years now. My partner had a loss of her mother early on in our relationship, and that was, at the turn of the new year. Shortly after that, I got word of a former colleague who was lost to us unexpectedly as well, towards the end of the winter time. And then about 2 years ago, one of my good friends and mentors from the military departed us very unexpectedly. And I've let those losses really just kind of go into that box somewhere inside without fully processing them, without fully releasing them up until recently. And they just kind of stayed in storage because I was focusing on trying to get through the days, trying to be there for my children, trying to be a good partner, trying to be a good firefighter. The pouring in I've put into this project, just keeping myself a little bit busy. And things have started to come up over the last several weeks. Strain within the relationship, things that should be easy that haven't been as easy, old habits resurfacing, and life getting harder. My patience with my kids getting shorter. Being frustrated at work for things that really don't need to be that frustrating. Just little things started to bubble through the surface. And again, this last couple weeks, I've got hit with it full on. And I say that because I'm not trying to teach any lessons, right? I really want to let you guys know I'm living it. We're all living it. So I'm not somebody who has done all the homework, found all the facts, and have the clean, keen answers to all of our problems. Instead, I'm somebody just like you who's actively going through life, trying to figure it out one piece at a time, and trying to share that story, have the conversations. So, one thing that I've heard people say for years, and I've been guilty of saying it too, right, is I never saw it coming. I almost said it this last week. I never saw it coming, this big blow up in my life. ChatGPT called me out directly on it as I was using it to kind of help frame some of my thought processes. And the reality is, it's sometimes true, but I don't think it's always true. I think we really know, right? We are pretty darn in tune with our bodies. We know when we're exhausted, we know when we're frustrated, We know when we're disconnecting. We know when we're carrying stuff. The signs are usually there. And the reality is the problem isn't the signs, it's our silence. It's us saying we'll deal with it later, after the shift, after the project gets done, after whatever season we're going through is over, after we fulfill whatever obligations we're trying to achieve. And before we know it, that time has come. And that later arrives. And we still haven't dealt with it. So, as I look back over the last couple weeks, the signs were all there. I knew it. I even remember saying things about it to people and just not opening up to the conversation, not admitting it to myself. What those signs look like for me, I was getting frustrated. I get frustrated easily, with stuff going on at work. I get frustrated with my kids doing kid stuff. I was getting frustrated and short with my partner, just being argumentative. I was withdrawing. I was finding excuses to kind of hang out and do my own thing. I was hiding out in the firehouse. I was taking more alone time, quiet time, just closing the door and pretending that I don't want to exist in whatever space I'm in and occupying. I was struggling with accepting things as they were being given to me, accepting needs that the kids have, that I had, that other people around me were having. Um, I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I was just feeling out of sorts. My body doesn't want to move. I had new aches and pains that, just felt like they were tightening up and holding on to something that I couldn't shake. So my body was telling me, my mind was telling me, my thoughts were trying to get out. It was all there. Like I said, the thoughts, the signs, they were all there. They weren't hidden and they were inconvenient. So, again, having experienced a major pivot point in my life, which I shared in the first episode about, being at the point of ready to take my own life and having my son kind of cry out and having that moment of realization I have more to live for, right? Major pivot point, kind of movie magic pivot point almost. That's kind of in my mind what pivot points really meant. And as I was going into this, that's what I was going to focus on. Like we hit these, rock bottom points where we finally realize that it's time to put up and change things and make a difference, make these life altering decisions, have these very specific moments where there's the before this happened and the after this happened. And I've had that. I've seen it. I've lived it. But that's not what all of our pivot points are. Most of our pivot points arrive without any fireworks. They just arrive with this honesty, having that realization, opening up into conversation. We get to that moment where we just stop pretending that everything's okay or pretending that we're managing as well as we want to. And we start just telling the truth. We acknowledge it to ourselves finally. We acknowledge it to the people who ask us how we're doing. And looking back, that's exactly what happened this last couple weeks. And it's happened repeatedly over and over again. It's the conversations with my friends, with my family, the hard ones. It's being honest about where things suck, where things are at, and hearing that back from others, sharing and support, love and care. And I always think it's crazy, having done this a few times, how I still avoid it. I was avoiding it this last couple weeks. I was avoiding being honest about where I was at. I think I was trying, but I wasn't doing it. And I've been honest in the past after avoiding that honesty. And I'll tell you, like, getting to that honest moment and finally releasing it is just amazing. So again, this last couple of weeks, I have been holding on to all this grief, holding on to these losses in my life, and needing a way to get it out, needing a good release of it. My body's telling me it, my mind's telling me it, my habits are telling me it. I'm not doing it. And pipe up a little bit here and there, and maybe I get met with a little bit of resistance, so I bottle all back up again. I don't give myself the honest space I need because I'd rather just get things done and do the things. And there's all the excuses that I've built up of, having to be ready to perform at work, having to take care of the kids, having to take care of the house, having to get to that next date night or whatever else is out there. And telling myself I can't take that space. I don't have that moment right now. And I have to find a way to gut it through because that's what we do. Letting those old habits rehash and come back out. And then, bam, it comes out. Whether I wanted to or not, like I finally took the breath, recognized it, said the words, and everything came out. And it came out when I felt like everything was falling apart around me because I let it get to that point. I had to ask one of my parents to come pick up my kids because I just couldn't think. I couldn't be playful. I couldn't function. I was depressed. I was having this weird combination of the grief coming through, the random memories from summertime in combat, this emotional strain of trying to sustain a healthy, happy relationship where I'm repeating old habits that let other relationships fail. And the more I recognized I'm repeating habits, the more I realized, oh crap, I'm not doing my own homework. I talk about using, Chat GPT. So I reached out to my therapist when I realized I was bottoming out. And unfortunately, she was out of town, unable to get me in with an appointment. Got across this hotline, used it, talked myself off my emotional ledge where I felt like I was just tipping over. And then I jumped into Chat GPT because as long as you establish some healthy rules and boundaries with how it feeds you information back, it actually is a pretty good window to get some reframing. And my partner and I, we were struggling because we had all this emotional buildup, both of us, that we hadn't released yet. And I threw it all into ChatGPT. We also had created early on in our relationship this document that kind of acknowledges our conflict patterns and styles. And ChatGPT, like one of the first things they hit me with is like, I could have told you this was coming. Your conflict styles and patterns and the information you've given me predicted this moment. That without correcting and acknowledging things in the right way, like you're going to get here. And that was kind of like my first this week moment of like, crap, I did it to myself. The signs were there, the patterns are there. I didn't do my homework. I didn't follow through. I didn't stay on top of it, right? I wasn't willing to open up and be vulnerable the way I have been practicing for the last several years. I was bottling things up and containing it. And of course, emotionally outletting now and having these waves of emotions that I tend to have and pushing people away. And then when I see that I've pushed them away, bottling myself up because I'm mad that I pushed them away. And it helped me remember to take some breaths and not just beat myself up, but to actually analyze the patterns, recognize what was going on, and start working on letting it go. Fun part, I had body aches. I couldn't move the way I'm used to moving. I hurt in, my joints and my neck and my back and all this stuff. I was having diarrhea because my body's just releasing all this stuff all of a sudden. Like I was physically sick on top of emotionally being depleted as I'm letting all this stuff finally flow through me. And that was not fun, but needed. I needed it. My body, again, was in line with my brain and saying, we need to let this stuff go. We need to let it out. And that's kind of what led me to realizing, like, need to have these conversations, need to chat with it. Putting myself kind of into this crisis mode over the last week really reminded me that the conversations are the things that need to happen. They need to be honest, they need to be open. And like I said, one of the hardest hits for me is to realize that I'm still doing the bad habits. I'm still storing grief instead of finding ways to release it. I'm not acknowledging my own needs or communicating them. I'm pouring myself into being productive instead of giving myself the permission to rest. I'm repeating the lessons that I thought I already learned. It's humbling to get there. Because I think a lot of us secretly believe that once we've unlocked this and we're now doing the good things, that we're achieving growth, and that means we don't have struggle anymore. But growth isn't about ceasing to struggle. Awareness isn't immunity. Just because we learned a lesson doesn't mean we have to stop practicing it. We get to be done practicing that lesson. Instead, it just means we have to put those lessons into practice. So, one of the easiest ways, I think, to really hit that home that I, again, have been now working on for the last several days is my relationships. I'm carrying all this stuff. My partner's carrying all this stuff. We had a really fun trip recently. It also had its overwhelming moments of like, holy crap, this is life now. And meanwhile, in the background, I've got all this other crap just building and building that I'm not letting out. I'm not recognizing. I'm not acknowledging. And it got to the point where I did exactly the thing that I have worked in therapy into not doing, that I have told my partner I wasn't going to be the guy who did, that I did in previous relationships that I knew shouldn't be done in this one. And I just had this massive surge and blow up. All the emotions came rushing out all at once. And I started just pushing myself away from the relationship. I let the fear of what might end up being that I had no control over push me into deciding I was going to push this wonderful thing that I have completely away, stop it now, because that's where I had control. And it almost worked. I almost killed the relationship in one fell swoop. I hurt my partner. I hit her where she asked me deliberately not to hit her because she can't repeat relational traumas like that. I was letting my relational traumas resurface and resurge. And I mean, it sucked. It really sucked. I ended up having to take time away from my kids. I took time away from work because I just burnt out, flamed out. And like I said, like my body is now in like full pushback against me. I can barely move. I'm having struggles sleeping. I have no energy. I'm sore. I'm just releasing again through my GI tract and sick. I got myself sick and just ended up breaking down and releasing everything. So every conversation that we avoid, and that's what easily could have prevented this from happening, is taking a breath and finding these conversations and just talking about it honestly, openly, carefully, with kindness and care. But every conversation I didn't have that I avoided about all of these things that were building up collected interest. And when it came time to pay that interest, like it took it out of me and it took me down for like 3 days. And I think that's the important thing about conversations and avoiding them, right? The thing that we're avoiding, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't just go away. It stays there, right? The grief stayed. Just because I had stopped talking about it doesn't mean the grief didn't exist anymore. Just because I was pushing myself without really giving myself the rest and reset that I needed doesn't mean that burnout's not coming. It just means that I'm not talking about it. Just because I'm not talking or acknowledging about the things that I need doesn't mean those needs are not important and are not there. Because I avoided having that conversation looking for help and using the resources that I have doesn't mean that that help isn't still needed, right? And honestly, like, I was avoiding conversations with my partner about what is working, what isn't working, and it was leading to these bigger emotional conversations that just kept showing up. So it's important when we got those things, when we got those ticks, when we're mulling this stuff over, right? It doesn't go away and it will show up somewhere else. And for me, it showed up everywhere all at once, right? It showed up in my lack of patience. It hit my relationship. It showed up in how I was parenting. It showed up in my presence at work. It showed up in my health. It showed up in my ability to be present and comfortable at home. Everything was now overwhelming because I wasn't releasing the things that I was storing. And that burden didn't disappear. It just changed shape into something that now required my attention. So, I don't know. I see it a lot in my peers and my friends group. We talk about productivity, like we like to produce things, we like to get things done, we stay busy. And I know I do that. I will dive myself headfirst into getting tasks done because it feels so nice and like I have control when I'm checking things off the checklist. Um, but we can also get that productivity if we're not using it as a stepping stone into like acknowledging stuff, that it becomes avoidance. And for me, like, that was full blown and present. I would do all the chores that I could get my hands on. I would try to focus in and tell myself I needed to take care of this for the kids or show up for this event or get materials recorded and prepped and released for the Unarmored Project. I was putting myself into little taskers at work, um, building whatever I could build or mess with whatever I could mess with, or hitting the flip side of it and just avoiding all things altogether and just bottoming out and being like, nope, I'm not even getting out of bed right now. Give me 30 more minutes. Avoiding people, avoiding things, avoiding tasks, and letting them pile up. And I have a tendency to flip flop back and forth between those things. And then I get pissed at myself if I let things go too long, or I get pissed at myself if I'm, burning my energy out by doing stuff. And again, it all eventually builds up, and then it hits me when things slow down and they're finally quiet and everything just pop releases. And I think it's important for us to remember, especially in the service space that we work in, that being able to function and healing are not the same thing, right? I think we are really good at putting ourselves into function, about saying, I can drive through this injury, I can drive through this thought process, I can drive through whatever is bothering me and go get some stuff done. But we also have to make sure we take that time and take that break and actually heal the things that are asking to be healed. So we gotta remember the importance behind that. Like, healing is not the same as functioning. Functioning is not the same as healing. Just because we can do things doesn't mean we're doing them to our best abilities. And in reflection, when I started the Unarmored Project, I thought I was just building this community resource for people to gain bridges to resources. And I really do believe that that matters, right? Having access to good, competent therapy matters. Having peer support really matters. Having community matters for us. I've also realized, though, like, most of our resources don't really begin with treatment. It begins with a conversation. A conversation that starts with, I'm not okay. I need help. I'm carrying more than I can handle alone. Maybe that's what the project really is about and has been about all along. Because really, it's not about having all the answers. I'm not here to fix anybody. And we don't need to pretend that life is just simple. but I really want to make sure that we are creating space for the conversations that we were never taught how to have. So, some final thoughts on this, I mean that we weren't taught to have these conversations. I know growing up as a 90s kid, um, I was never taught how to say, I need help with anything other than like getting physical help to get a task complete. And even then, like, we strong, we're macho, we figure out our own way. I was never taught how to say I'm not okay. I was never taught how to really be vulnerable and share my emotions. I always wanted to have that projection of strength, that projection of I got stuff. You can lean on me. I can handle anything. I'm a rock. I had to learn all these skills as an adult, and that's tough, man. I think it's really tough as an adult to learn how to have the skill to open up and get the help that we need. So that conversation for me, I mean, it still looks like being able to turn to my kids and tell them, hey, dad is having a rough day. I could just use a little love, cooperation, maybe be a little less rowdy. And I don't have the energy to go nuts and crazy. It's turning to my partner and telling her, it's been a rough week. I really just could use some space to not be productive, to just relax a little bit. And I could use that hug. Turning to my parents and saying, hey, guess what? I'm depressed this week. So I might not be able to come, share as much of our day as we originally planned, but doesn't mean I'm not there. Doesn't mean I don't care. Being able to call into work, say my body, I am not doing great. I need to take the time off. And then taking that space and actually doing something with it. And that is still patterns, thoughts, a mindset that I am learning to continue to overcome. To not just always be present and available for everybody else, but to allow that to be present and available to me. To turn to my friends and say, hey man, can we just grab a beer and bullshit for an evening? Let it out. We're going to learn. We're going to make mistakes. We got to give ourselves that grace. So if you're listening today, I really want you to understand that you don't have to wait until everything has fallen apart to start those conversations. There's nothing perfect that you can say. There's nothing for certain that needs to be done. You don't have to have a plan. It's just having the honesty and beginning from there. Because when I look back at my life, the biggest pivot points weren't these major events. They were really the conversations that I finally had, and the conversations I wish I'd had sooner. And honestly, some of the conversations I'm still learning how to have today. So thank you for spending time with me. This has been the Unarmored Project. And until next time, don't carry it alone.